Hello and welcome to episode 153 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, I take a close look at e-bikes from Costco. Did I get a cheap hot dog while I was there? Yes. And enough toilet paper to get me through the next two pandemics. Or at least one Costco hot dog.
Canada's government pension plan now owns 1 million shares of Tesla stock. This means that working Canadians, including James, are now Tesla shareholders. Although calling this podcast work is a bit of a stretch.
I learned some environmental truths from the phenomenal Oscar-nominated film All That Breeze. Then later, Brian previews this year's Oscar red carpet fashion trends.
Yeah, it's all plaid. It's going to be plaid. Volkswagen is using escape rooms to train their employees for the coming revolution in electric vehicles. The concern is that they will then use those skills to escape their jobs at Volkswagen.
And why floating offshore wind power costs more. And a new look at the space renewables will take up as we get to net zero. All that and, believe it or not, even more on this week's edition of the Clean Energy Show. Welcome back, Brian.
Yeah, so I'm back from Toronto. Had a nice 4 days in Toronto, seeing some friends of ours and just having a relaxing old time in my retirement. That's what I do now.
Oh, it is. Well, do you have any gossip on the friends? Are they all still kicking? Anybody in homes yet?
Yes. So here's the updates. But first of all, so I was getting on the plane here at the airport in our town, Regina. And I'm in the lineup to get on the plane, and a guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you Brian from the Clean Energy Show?"
What?
Yeah. And I thought, gee, that's weird to be recognized from an audio podcast. But then I realized, okay, well, we do have a video component as well. So maybe not that strange. But I was wearing a mask as well. So,
what the living hell? Who?
I was impressed that...
What listener did this to Brian? You email us now and identify yourself.
Well, he did tell me his name, but of course I've forgotten it. But, he knew that I was on the way to Toronto because I had mentioned it on the podcast. So, I immediately called security and had him hauled away.
That's weird. But, I mean, I'm not blaming you, the listener, for doing that, but I mean, it's kind of an absurd situation to be in.
And he pointed that out as well. But anyway, so I get on the plane and... who was on the plane but a local celebrity? Lowell Dean was on the plane.
Wow.
Our friend, Lowell Dean, who directed the movie WolfCop, that James has a little cameo appearance in.
Well, I was just below the line, Brian. I was almost a guest star, really.
Yeah. A great movie. If anyone hasn't seen it, WolfCop, it's about a cop who turns into a werewolf. Although not really, it's a not safe for work movie, if you know what I mean.
Oh, definitely not. No Lowell Dean film is safe for anything. That's the way he likes it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I arrived in Toronto and I took the Up Express train from the airport to downtown. This is a train that they built about 10 years ago. It was always a pain in the ass to get to the airport in Toronto, but they built this train about 10 years ago, goes straight from the airport to Union Station right in downtown Toronto, and it worked great as usual. But, after I got there, I found out my friends were telling me that they're having mechanical problems with these trains. And in fact, the whole thing was out of service just 3 days previous.
Really?
If I'd come 3 days earlier, I wouldn't have been able to use it, and I would have had to take a cab or something.
But unfortunately, it's a diesel locomotive. Yeah.
So when they built it 10 years ago, it was a sort of a controversial decision that they went with diesel because, of course, everybody wanted them to go to electric. And, of course, like Toronto already has electric streetcars and electric subways, so it was a little bit odd that they chose diesel. But this was kind of a new train line, so it wasn't already wired for electrical. So they went, with diesel, which was disappointing to me and a lot of people. But they're having mechanical problems with these trains. It has nothing to do with the diesel. It's something the other mechanics. It sounds like they're not holding up. No, with the trains, something to do with the trains and the brakes or something. I'm not really sure, but I get the feeling that they may end up scrapping these trains early and then, switching to electric.
Well, I've been going down the rabbit hole of trains on YouTube because I sort of got interested. I was talking about last week.
Yeah.
The show that these YouTubers do is a very low budget show, but it's just amazing how you can just do a show to get, cover all these countries within 2 days. And whoever gets there first wins. And that's simplifying it. But because they had to do tasks, and there was
This is like a great race.
It's
like
called
an
Jet
amazing
Lag
race?
on YouTube, and it's just shot with iPhones, and the audio suffers from time to time, but it's I found it kind of entertaining. Plus, it was a great introduction, and I'm not even sure that it wasn't even meant to be an introduction to just how great the trains are in Europe and how we should do better here in North America.
Yeah.
Because it's just so easy. You don't even have to, so he was pointing out that in Canada, you have to check in like you do in airport early and have to weigh your luggage. For some, as if the thing leaves the ground and has to know how heavy it is. I mean, come on.
No, and my complaint about the plane service, so I'm getting on the plane in Regina, and they an announcement like an hour before the flight, and they're like, oh, okay, it's a full flight, and because of the plane that we're using, I'm going to need 25 people to come forward and check their roller bags because we're not going to have enough room for everybody's carry-on luggage. And so like every 10 minutes, they have to keep making this announcement. Hey, okay, I need, 15 more people. Come forward. Come on, people.
Yeah, that happened
Give us your bags.
to my daughter when she went on her school trip. And there was this aggressive kid who wanted a window seat because my daughter, her name starts with A, so she got the window seat because the teacher just wrote her down. She kept getting window seat, which is great because it's the first time she's actually flown. And, I wanted her to have the full value of her experience, and she lucked out in that way. So anyway, somebody was jonesing for her window seat, and they thought that if they checked their bag that they could have that upgrade, but they were sadly mistaken. Grade 9.
We don't have the train service here, and we don't really have the plane service either,
or the streets, or the bike infrastructure, or that's another thing. And it's just, I'm so envious of so many European, the bike infrastructure of some European cities. It's just.
Yep.
The Not Just Bikes channel is done by a Canadian who's moved from what we're used to the Netherlands, which is great. I think it's the Netherlands. Yep. Yeah, it's the Netherlands.
Yeah, Amsterdam, I think.
Yeah. And it's just, when they separate, and they have studies done by universities that show that when the bike traffic is physically separated from vehicular traffic, that more people bike. And, I can just imagine, can you imagine a bike path out your back door that just took you anywhere you wanted to go and you could connect to things and not have to deal with traffic? I mean, I would probably ride my bike a lot too. No,
and they have all this amazing bike infrastructure in Amsterdam. I think you sent me a link about all these amazing underground parking garages for bikes. It's just incredible. And it's all very expensive, but it's cheaper than, the alternatives.
Roads are very expensive.
More roads. And, not to mention the health problems that come from cars and roads, and your people get healthier when they're biking.
Oh my God, yes, they have to. I don't see how you couldn't. And, just walkable cities too. That's another big issue, that our cities are not walkable here. They're just horrendous. You don't realize it because you grow up with it, but then you see that there's a better way. And the people who've decided there's a better way didn't always know that, because their cities were similar to ours until, say, the 90s, when they started actively saying there's got to be a better way. And my God, there is.
And there has been improvements in Toronto for bike infrastructure. Our city is still lagging far behind. So I just wanted to mention, tomorrow is Tesla Investor Day. So we're expecting some big announcements from Tesla tomorrow, possibly about their next generation, less expensive car. So we'll talk about that next week.
Or that's today if you're not listening to us live, which I don't believe anyone is, except for Google, who just keeps disconnecting you before we do the podcast.
March 1st is the day
what do you expect, Brian? What are you hoping for?
Well, they've said that it's going to be all about scale. So they're going to just talk about their plans. I think it'll be long-term plans, kind of like Battery Day, long-term plans for how to scale up all the things that they need to scale up, batteries and minerals and all the things that are needed for all
What
that.
about a more affordable platform? Because that's been rumored.
Yeah, I don't think they'll unveil the car itself, because if they unveiled it, then there's the Osborne effect, and people will maybe stop buying the Model 3 and the Model Y because they'll be waiting for this cheaper car. So I don't think they're going to unveil the car, but they might talk about how they're going to make it, which sounds to be like more casting, like this is how they're going to drive the cost down.
I'm kind of feeling negative about Tesla, not because of the antics of the CEO, but because it clearly seems like, we're going to talk about, I think, the Hyundai Kona later. They've got a new model out, completely redesigned. Like the automakers, even VW, who are still screwing things up, but they're coming out with major revisions on a fairly regular basis. And because they're automakers, they can adapt. And when I found myself really shopping, like really seriously shopping, not just fantasy shopping, but really shopping, the other things were compelling compared to Tesla. And since they're opening that supercharger network, then that makes it interesting for the competition. Now, I know it's the goal of Tesla to advance electrification, but what will that do to the company?
Yeah, the Tesla charging network is obviously one of the big advantages. But as we've sort of talked about, like there's certainly big plans for expanding the non-Tesla charging network and Tesla opening up to, other cars. So, but I think that's still kind of 2 years away is what I would say. I think for non-Teslas, the charging situation in North America should be pretty good in about 2 years. So a bit iffy till then, but, 2 years will be up before you know it. So, if you buy a non-Tesla car now, you can probably make do with the charging that's available.
So yesterday I was noticing, and I couldn't figure out why. It's the second last day of February, I think, was when I was noticing this. Everybody had the February blues. They've been fed up with winter. They've been fed up with, just winter because it's been.
I'm fed up.
Are you? Well,
yep.
But they were talking about their mental health, and I was like having this great day. The sun was shining in all my windows, and it was warm. The temperature had gone up a few degrees, more than it should have, because the sun was heating the house extra. So it felt like, oh, summer. Maybe I should open the window. But it feels like summer. And you look outside and you see snow, and you think, well, why is there this white stuff on the grass? Like it literally tricks you into feeling like it's summer. So I just want to put a shout out to Passive Solar Design. And I think the benefits get greater as you go away from the equator, right? Because you're getting colder climates and you're getting more benefits from shorter days. And the days are getting longer now.
Yeah. And, we're finally getting some sunshine. It's normally very, very sunny here, really all year round. But this winter was, kind of cloudy and foggy. We had a lot of fog this winter, which is sort of weird.
Yeah.
But finally the sun is coming out. But yeah, it's suckers. I get suckered every year thinking spring is here. And then before you know it, it's minus 30. And, I feel like an idiot for getting optimistic.
Well, I think everyone does that, except for weather geniuses like me who know better. Brian, I know better. So I was at Costco the other day to get new reading glasses for the show, which I'll debut next week on the YouTube channel. So don't miss that.
Okay.
The first ones I picked out, they said, oh, no, sir, this is too small for your giant head, basically, is what they implied. And they were. Because I have to buy big glasses for my giant head. And there's not a lot of selection of that. The, John Goodman-sized XL frames. So I was there and I saw they had some e-bikes out. Now, they've got a lot more on their websites than they do in the store. But they've got 3 models in the store here. I've got pictures for you to look at, Brian.
And this is Costco, right?
This is Costco at the Costco warehouse where we live. And in Canada, they have, I think, 3 bikes out. They might have more in the United States than that. This is going to seem expensive to you south of the border, but there was a fat bike for $2,000, which actually I thought was a pretty good value because it's a solidly built fat tire bike, which you can use in snow, ostensibly, sand, mud, rain, basically any conditions. It's $2,000 with a 60-kilometer range. That's if you pedal, if you assist it, less if you don't. 32 kilometer an hour speed limit, which is that's not about bad. The highest it gets in North America, I think. And it's got disc brakes, like name brand disc brakes, which I thought is a nice touch because they often don't when they try to make an e-bike cheap. It's got Shimano Acera shifter at the back, which is not high end, but it's not the low end crap that you sometimes see on the Chinese imported e-bikes that are assembled that way with the cheapest components. So that's just sort of a thing that tips me off to the quality overall. It's got a Bafang 48 volt 500 watt motor on the rear wheel. That's good. That's a good brand name. So that's usually those brands are more expensive and you can't get them on the cheaper e-bikes. So that's good. And by the way, the discs are hydraulic, which is great. It's got a heavy duty rack on it, which I think you could put pretty much anything on there. So it's got lights on there and bells and heavy duty fenders. So it's all set to go for a commuter bike and under any conditions or whatever you wanted to use it for. It's got a fairly low step over. not really low, but it's kind of like a low mountain bike level step over with its adjustable seat. So that's good. It's a little more if you order it online. It's a couple $100 to deliver that in Canada. But they had a folding bike, one of those small folding bikes. You bought a couple of them. This one was only $450, and now I looked today, it was $350 on sale for a couple of weeks. And I looked at the specs, and it seemed pretty good to me. It's got a 24-kilometer range with throttle only. It does have pedals, so it's not like some of the things where you just have a post to put your feet on. You can paddle it on with a single gear. And it doesn't really fold in half, but it folds down. The seat and the handlebars fold down. It's got small wheels. It holds 265 pounds, which is a good indication that it's well built. 25 kilometers an hour for this one. This one also has disc brakes. So you can go 50 kilometers in it with if you are pedaling along with it, so and helping it out. So $350, Brian?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really good for what you get.
Yeah, the options for e-bikes are definitely expanding, but it's still that kind of thing where you really have to shop around a lot, and it's going to depend a lot on what city you live in, if you can see them in person, or I've ended up ordering mine on the internet, which is not ideal, but you can get a good deal that way sometimes.
Now, one indication to look for is the weight of the bike. That will tell you the quality, the heavier the bike. Now, mine, I'm pretty happy with the quality of my mountain bike style e-bike, but it's 52 pounds. But this one here was about 10 pounds less, I think, or 9 or 10 pounds less, the bigger bike. So that's pretty good because, well that e-bikes are heavy, even to lift a little bit. Like they're just big, heavy things. And
lighter is always better with bikes. Last week, we had a really thoughtful letter from a listener who was concerned about the issues in the Congo with cobalt mining. This is one of the downsides of electric vehicles, is that the batteries up till now have used cobalt, and this is decreasing every year, as we discussed last week. But there was a story came out from Bloomberg about the aluminum in Ford trucks. I don't know. The issue it sort of brought up last week is that we often don't talk about the negative stories when it comes to the clean energy transition. And I think that's largely because it's largely a good news story. Like, we're getting off oil and we're getting on to clean energy. Like, that's the basics of what's going on. But of course, there are sometimes issues like in the Congo with cobalt. And in this particular case, Bloomberg did an investigation on the aluminum that's used in the Ford F-150 electric pickup truck. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because, I don't know, it's just a question to me of like, well, okay, there are these negative stories out there. The oil industry is doing a good job of promoting all the negative stories about clean energy, so we don't have to do it. But yeah, there was just a couple of examples of it that sort of came up this week that I thought I would mention. And yeah, this one was from Bloomberg. The aluminum in the Ford F-150 truck comes from Brazil, from the Amazon rainforest, from this notorious mine that is making people sick. And there's a very large class action lawsuit going up from the 11,000 residents near this mine that are getting sick, apparently, from the toxicity of this mine. It's bad news. And then the other bad news story from this week was a wind turbine collapsed. And I think we hear these stories every once in a while. This was in Illinois. A wind turbine collapsed in Illinois. Yeah, it's a thing that happens sometimes.
Was it a storm or
no? It's just some kind of a structural issue, and it collapsed. And it mentioned in the story a couple of other places. So this does happen occasionally. So there are bad news stories sometimes about clean energy. I don't know. I'm not going to make too much of an effort to report on them, but I just don't want to seem like we're, somehow naive to all of these various problems in the world.
Well, occasionally a coal mine collapses and people die. Occasionally power lines fall over and
well, yeah.
Stuff happens.
And every day we dig up, 40 million barrels of oil a day. I don't know, and burn it. And that kills people,
as you well know, die doing that. So that's no fun either.
Yeah. And there was another story this week, speaking of like wind turbines collapsing, there was a company that is now doing spiral welding for wind turbines. This was on the Electrek website.
I saw that headline, but I didn't understand what they were talking about.
Yeah, they make the steel in a big sheet, and then they wrap it in a curl. You know, it's like those Pillsbury dough. When you crack open the Pillsbury dough, it's in that spiral. It's in that same kind of spiral shape. If you know what I'm talking about.
Don't doubt that.
But yeah, it's a better, cheaper way to make gigantic wind turbines. And maybe they're structurally stronger as well. Maybe it will, not collapse as easily, which does not happen very often. But apparently, every once in a while, wind turbines collapse.
Well, hopefully, no one or no thing gets hurt by that because they're usually off by themselves.
Yeah, usually they're off in the middle of nowhere. So I don't think it's...
hopefully, the engineers are competent that are putting them up, and from all accounts, they seem to be. I mean, occasionally the turbines will catch on fire or something like that, or some sort of mechanism or safety mechanism that doesn't work. But it's not a harm to anybody. It's just,
and of course, batteries catch on fire sometimes too. And we do mention that on the show, but, it's not all good news, but it's overwhelmingly good news.
Ryan's Movie Corner. Okay, it's James's Movie Corner.
But we don't have an intro.
Well, I didn't think I'd ever have one. I would have made one if I thought I'd be doing movie corners too. This is the segment that you invented way back in single digits of our show.
Yeah, it's been a while.
All That Breeze is a documentary that I watched on HBO, or Crave TV here in Canada that carries HBO. Now, you got me hooked on a podcast called The Biz.
The Business, yeah.
The Business, which is out of...
KCRW in California, public radio in California, and it's a, film and television news podcast.
Right up our alley. Brian and I have a connection to that sort of thing. And, well, I was listening to it, and they featured the movie this week. You probably didn't hear it, did you?
I did.
You did hear it. So you haven't watched the show, though.
I haven't watched the film yet.
Well, you have to watch it. I really like it. I liked last year's winner, too, the octopus documentary. I don't know. I forgot the title. It slips my mind now. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So it's done by Shanak Sen. This is an immersive documentary. Okay. It's not talking heads. It's sort of fly on the wall. And the way he did that is he stayed for months and months until they just literally thought he was a fly in the wall. He and his cinematographer, eventually they start acting natural and forgetting that he's there. So this is really true-to-life moments crafted from God knows how many hours of footage. I think it's a remarkable film. I'll read you the description of it that they have from their website. In one of the world's most populated cities, cows, rats, monkeys, frogs, and hogs jostle cheek by jowl with people. Two brothers fall in love with a bird, the black kite. Now, this is a bird, a majestic bird, often thought of in India, but kind of hated as well because it's taken over from vultures, and because there's so much trash in India, or in Delhi, where the film is set. They're constantly hovering above the skies, and they're hated by some. In fact, they took one in to get treated when they were teenagers. They were teenage bodybuilders, and they took one in. They found that it was injured, and they wouldn't treat it because it was not a vegetarian. It ate meat, so they wouldn't treat it. And so they had to nurse it back to health themselves. And I guess that made them feel really good. They never forgot that feeling, and they keep repeating it literally thousands of times over and over again. They are both Muslim in a world there's some political unrest against Muslims in this going on sort of in the background, which is kind of interesting, but not a focal point of the film, but it's always mentioned. From their makeshift bird hospital in their tiny, dank basement, the brothers care for thousands of these creatures that drop daily from New Delhi's smog-choked skies. They literally fall from the sky, Brian. And as environmental toxicity and civil unrest escalate, the relationship between this Muslim family and the neglected kite, the black kite bird, forms a poetic chronicle of the city's collapsing ecology and rising social tensions. The Times UK says the film is profound in the philosophical points it raised and how we are all connected in the vast ecosystem. Sen's mesmerizing masterpiece is also a worrying look at how pollution and overpopulation are placing an intolerable strain on the balance between humans and nature. Now, I'm going to play a 90-second clip from the film, and I thought, well, how can I do that? It's in a different language than English, and it's a lot of visuals. So I used descriptive video, which was a genius move by James.
Interesting.
Descriptive video, which I've never listened to before because I've never needed to, but it's for the blind, of course. And I just clicked on that setting and recorded a piece of the podcast for you all to have a listen to. Here it is.
Daytime. A smokestack towers above an industrial complex. Dark fumes waft into the gray, overcast sky. In slow motion, a kite flaps by.
As Delhi's air changed, so did its metabolism.
More kites pass beneath power lines.
Songbirds sing at a higher pitch to communicate over traffic noise. Lizards are growing new toes.
They perch, backed by metal pylons.
The kite is a traditional bird. A kite rests, roosts, bathes, and attacks in the same style all its life. Every kite has a code. But code breaking is natural today. Every life form adjusts to the city now.
The silhouette of a dog prowls in the distance.
Rats, pigs, frogs, mosquitoes, turtles, insects, cows, and horses.
It sniffs at the ground as it goes. More smoke leaks from a chimney.
All improvise and adapt to the city.
The billowing gas paints the sky a sickly black.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Brian, and I recommend it for everyone. It is really the relationship between the ecosystem and people and how we're part of it, which is the title, All That Breathe, where that title comes from. Because, we talk about India here on the show, but it's very foreign to us in North America unless you've visited there, and I haven't. You haven't, right? I haven't had the chance yet. But this is very intimate because you're with a family of people who have different characteristics, and you sort of their characters, you get to know them, you get to know the struggle, and it becomes real. And that's a big achievement for the film. So I got interested, and I started digging around on, why it's so bad that these birds fall out of the sky. Now, part of it is because kite flying in India is very popular, as it is in many parts of the world.
Like regular kites, not the bird.
There's some sort of diamond sharp string that they use to cut down other people's kites in competitions. And the government banned it, but he said almost every kite still has that string on it. So it's cutting the wings of these poor birds and other creatures that are in the sky. But it's also the pollution. And, they struggled with pollution in the show. It's bad for particularly 3 months of the year in the early winter. It's largely from people burning crops and other things. They had air purifiers in the house, and they would talk about it. It was a daily conversation at dinner, and their air purifier would have this red light on it, and it would say, things are really bad right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've got a fast fact for you here, if you don't mind. This is a CAS fast fact. Every 2 minutes, one person dies from air pollution in India. And that was 1.2 million people in 2017. 1.2 million people in one country dying from air pollution. It's incredible. 18% of all deaths in India are from air pollution. So 18%, almost 1 in 5 of everybody dying is dying from the goddamn air in India. It's just incredible. Now, I would like to think that it's an easy fix. Electrify the transportation and the energy grid, but it's not that easy. People are staying indoors, and even in cars, even driving in cars is dangerous. So your Tesla, what is that, the air purification you have called? The
bioweapon defense mode?
Bioweapon defense mode would be particularly useful in India, in New Delhi. So schools close, and even rich people have air-sealed houses. Air sealing in India is important for different reasons than it is here in our cold climate. It's to keep the damn air out. And they have air purifiers. And these guys were lucky enough to have air purifiers. They have a business in their home where they assemble lotion dispensers. So that's going on at a workbench constantly while they're saving these birds at another workbench. The air pollution instruments don't even go high enough to measure what happens there now. So agricultural burning is upwind from them in Delhi, and this mountain range keeps the air in. Burning of crops because there's not enough water, so climate change has made it necessary to burn crops more now than it did before climate change was showing its ugly face. Cement and construction dirt. Cement and construction is a big thing. I don't quite understand where all the particulate matter comes from that. But dirt roads are more common, so that gets whipped up with people driving on various vehicles. Firewood for cooking. A lot of people who are too poor for, sort of a middle-class lifestyle will use firewood and coal for cooking, as you know. And 30% of the pollution comes from households overall. Garbage burning is also a thing. Even firecrackers contribute significantly to the particulate matter because of the cultural preference for it. So there's also a lot of weather inversions to cold air under hot air. And 6 years of life expectancy is reduced if you live in the city. 6 years, which is incredible. And also developmental problems for children, which is going to, that's going to affect the next generation and generations after that if it's not fixed. They put up a couple of air purifiers on towers as a desperate move, like industrial grade. It's almost science fiction-y.
Yeah.
It's got only like a 1 kilometer radius that it works well with, which is like half a mile. So even a newborn baby there is considered a smoker, Brian. This comes out of the hatch, it's considered a smoker because the mom has inhaled that air and it's gotten into the baby. So on its first day, it is smoking the equivalent of 10 to 15 cigarettes. A newborn baby, just by breathing in the house. It's ridiculous. So doctors, they say they never see any pink lungs, even in teenagers. It's all bad lungs. And it's incredible. And part of the problem can be solved by electrification, especially two-wheel transportation. But anyway, yeah. So who's got the worst air pollution? Lahore does. Delhi's second. Mumbai's down the list. Beijing is about 8th or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's on HBO if you're lucky enough to have it, or maybe you can rent it on iTunes and Crave TV here in Canada.
Yeah, and it's called All That Breathes. This story is from Bloomberg. Volkswagen is apparently using escape rooms to train their employees for the coming revolution in electric vehicles. So there was a lot of discussion about Volkswagen. Herbert Diess was the CEO, and he was trying hard to push VW towards an electric future, and they've done pretty well, actually. They've produced and sold several 100,000 electric vehicles. They're not doing so bad. They still have problems with the software and stuff like that. But it's, there was a lot of talk about the cultural change necessary. It's very difficult to change the culture at such a large company with such a long history, right? Like they've been doing one thing for, 100 years, and the switch to electric vehicles is going to be difficult and long. And Herbert Diess was eventually pushed out as CEO, probably because he was, pushing maybe too hard for electrification. But I don't know. I just thought this story was fun and humorous. They are using escape rooms. So, these are like sort of group training exercises that they're doing with their employees at VW. So it says here, in teams of 4, employees need to solve riddles as they move through spaces themed on electricity and battery technology, moving from an 1860s living room to present day and future scenarios requiring tech skills to crack codes and find clues in lockers, like an escape room, if anyone's ever been in an escape room. So earlier this month, Ford Motor Company said it's cutting 38 jobs, mostly in Germany, as that automaker goes electric in that area, with EV models requiring fewer people to make them. But over at VW, they are, I don't know, it seemed to me that they should just work on making the cars better, but,
Now, is this because the employees don't want to learn about EVs, that they're stuck in the old ways and they're just...
I guess they're just looking for a fun way for everyone to learn about it, because...
Lock them in a room and they have to escape by learning.
I mean, I wouldn't enjoy that. Escape rooms are not something I'm interested in.
You're locking one now during the podcast. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, okay, VW, you be you. I wanted to talk about floating offshore wind prices and why they're higher. And this is information that I didn't think about before. Basically, we're just at the tip of the iceberg of floating offshore wind potential. And the U.S. has a goal of deploying 30 gigawatts of it. That's 30 nuclear reactors worth offshore by 2030. And they have to they have to rely on floating because of the geography. So the U.S. Department of Energy pegs the cost of floating offshore wind power at $200 per megawatt hour. Land-based wind is $30. So that's really significantly different. And solar is $35, a tinge more. Fixed offshore wind is $80, so that's more expensive than onshore. It's a challenge. So last week there was a summit to try and figure out how to get these costs down to $45 per megawatt hour, or roughly 70% less. So they get all these brains in the room, and I don't know what they figured out or if they figured out anything, but they were trying desperately to figure out a way to lower the cost because it is such a new technology. Around 2/3 of the potential power from offshore wind in the U.S., will have to be floating because of the depth of the ocean that's close to the shore. So offshore floating wind is now being rolled out all over the world. It's also really new, says Electric. A White House brief noted that globally, only 0.1 gigawatts of floating offshore wind has been deployed to date. That is really tiny. Yeah. Tiny compared to 50 gigawatts of fixed bottom offshore wind, which has been around for a long time, but is really taking off now.
Yeah, well, hopefully somebody can figure out how to bring those costs down. Okay, so this is a story from Drive Tesla Canada. So the Canada Pension Plan, they now own 1 million shares of Tesla. They acquired a bunch more.
So what is the Canada Pension Plan? It's basically, it's like a pension plan for a company where you invest in different things, but it's for our retirement of our socialized country here.
Yeah. So basically, if you've ever had a job anywhere in Canada, you've paid money into the CPP, and when you retire, you can take it at age 60 or 65 or delay it up to age 70. This is your government pension, and usually you put some off your paycheck, the government then kicks in. So this is really the largest pension fund in Canada. It's the government one. And they've got 1 million shares of Tesla now, according to Drive Tesla Canada. So I just thought that's interesting. It means that I think that Tesla as an investment is kind of becoming more mainstream when a fund like that, it's a sign of legitimacy, I guess, that they think that they're not going to squander the Canadian people's money on that.
Where were they 5 years ago when you started investing? I'd be rich, Brian. I too would be rich as a Canadian.
They would have made the Canadian people more money if they had invested 5 years ago. But of course, it was a more risky investment back then. So what are you going to do?
All right. I want to talk a little bit about land use again, because I have some new numbers here of what it's going to take to meet our Paris climate targets. A recent National Renewable Energy Laboratory study shows it would take less than 1% of the land in the lower 48 states, that is the continental U.S., that's an area comparable to even smaller than the fossil fuel industry's current footprint, which we've mentioned before in the show. But they also found that the total amount of land needed by 2035 to achieve our clean energy power grid goals with wind, solar, and long-distance transmission lines would be equivalent to the land area currently occupied by railroads, coincidentally, which is
interesting.
Interesting, yes. Less than half the area of active oil and gas leases. This is half the area of current oil and gas. The oil and gas people themselves are putting out nonsense and spreading it around that says it's going to take up so much land. Well, look at yourself. Look in the mirror, people.
Let's have your land.
Yeah, you're not using it. Less than 1/3 of the area currently needed for ethanol production. That's for everything. To decarbonize the grid, 1/3 of the area currently used for ethanol, and only slightly more than historically disturbed land for coal mining. That is the land that has been disturbed by dead coal mines. So, yeah, that's it's not much. It's not much, and you can look at the graphs. I think Clean Technica has an article on it as well.
And if we could spare all this land for oil and gas, for trains, we can do it for clean energy to save the planet. So why don't we do that? I wanted to mention quickly Hyundai and the Ioniq 6. The pricing is out for the Hyundai Ioniq 6, which is a car we've mentioned on the show before. It's kind of a cool looking, I really like the look of it. It's a 4-door sedan type of car, kind of similar in size to the Tesla Model 3, I would say, fully electric sedan. They released the pricing and it's really good. The starting price for the Ioniq 6 in the USA is going to be $41,600.
And that's pretty good.
That is totally reasonable. And this is a car with really excellent efficiency. It's got the miles per gallon equivalent of 140. which is right around the top of the list of what's available. So the total range, 361 miles, which is a little over 500 kilometers, I believe. This is a totally solid car. I mean, I'm scared they're not going to make enough of them, and it's going to sell out really quick.
Well, of course they are. You got to put a deposit down, Brian Stockton. Breaking news.
I mean, I already have a car that's kind of the same size and shape, so I don't think I need one. But I mean, if somebody is interested, I think maybe get down to your Hyundai dealer and put down a deposit, because I think they will go pretty fast. That's a pretty compelling vehicle and a pretty compelling price, I would say.
I was watching a video the other day I was thinking about how the Hyundais charge fast because they're on the 800-volt architecture.
Yeah, they've got a nice architecture, yeah.
And 18 minutes from 10 to 80% is often quoted.
If you can find a super fast charger, yeah.
Well, I was wondering what it would be in practical conditions, because I know there's some 150 kilowatt chargers out there, but not the full 350, which they don't take full advantage of. But I mean, that's the high-end standard. Yeah. It's only about 4 minutes. It was only because of the charging curves and everything. It was only about a 4-minute difference. So that's not bad. I mean, I would prefer to have that 4 minutes off. I think on a regular basis, that would actually, not be unnoticeable as it sounds when I say it out loud, but yeah. And, Hyundai, they're making great cars. Kia's making great cars. I can't buy them. I was looking at the Volkswagen ID4. Well, somebody in, I think Ontario or somewhere had an order in, and they got it fully loaded, and they got an email from the company saying, well, we can't give you the heat pump because of supply shortages. We talked about that on the show. But then they listed a whole bunch of other things like a stereo and, things that you wouldn't associate with anything. I mean, I don't associate a heat pump with chip shortages, but there's all kinds of things that they took off his car and then said, well, it'll be 6 months, but you can order it now if you want.
Wow.
I don't know what's going on with these people, Brian, but they have to do better. And the lightning round is a fast-paced look at the headlines in clean energy and climate news, and that's how we wind up the show every week. It's a short one this week. Mercifully, engineers found that heating surfaces rather than air reduced energy consumption by 13% in delivery vans, equating to a 5% increase in range based on real-world charging patterns. I find this interesting. Because this is like, they use seat heaters and steering wheel heaters in my car so that you use less heat, because you don't have waste heat in an electric car. You have to use your battery the same battery that drives you, and it takes some of that away. So you don't have as much range when it's cold out. Well, if they had a panel like Toyota has.
Yeah, it's the one cool thing in Toyota's electric cars that they have a panel kind of down by your legs and feet.
Couple of them,
that
Brian.
Radiates.
One by your feet and one by your shins. And it sounds great, like a really good idea to me. Like everyone should say, oh, good idea, let's do that too. That's what they should be doing if they cared about cold weather. Because that would make people a lot more, I would like that. I would like that in my car now. Right now, I would like that. You wouldn't get cold. It'd be comfortable, and you wouldn't use that much heat. It uses a lot less heat to heat an area or the body itself than the cabin itself of the area. International Energy Agency, solar is set to overtake all other power sources by 2027. And someone pointed out the International Energy Agency is always wrong. So lop a couple of years off that. It could be 2025 when that happens.
Yeah. It's being deployed so quickly.
So they think in 3 years it'll overtake gas. In 4 years it will push past worldwide coal production of electricity. I think that's, we don't hear, everybody's got something else to talk about, but solar is actually quietly taking over the freaking world, as we said it would from day one of this podcast. Thank you very much. The EU price on carbon is topping 100 euros a ton now. So that's where we're going to end up in Canada at the end of the decade, but they're already there. Yeah,
so Canada and Europe have both placed a carbon tax on carbon pollution. And Canada's, the cost of your carbon pollution is slowly rising every year. And so in Europe, I guess it's already at 100 euros a ton, which is a great way to discourage people from burning stuff.
All right, everyone sit down. Wherever you are, subway car, riding a bike, stop, pull over to a park bench. This may be shocking. Texas is about to surpass California in solar capacity.
Wow.
Texas, oil capital of the United States of America. Texas has installed more through utility scale solar than California each year since 2019. They got cheap land. They're listing the reasons why this might be happening. Lots of sunshine, easy permitting, and that can't be underestimated. The permitting has
Very
to
important.
be easy, and relatively easy grid interconnection and not terrible transmission. So I bet no one in Texas knows this. I bet no one anywhere knows this, except our listeners to our show. Yeah, it's this is the power of solar. Even in places you wouldn't expect it, it's taking over. And that's a really good example, to apply to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and Texas is a very much of a free market when it comes to energy, which has caused them problems in the past. They've had very bad blackout problems the last couple of years, but it will also maybe eventually help the problem because it's easy to put on new solar.
And speaking of offshore wind, Biden is finally considering his first offshore wind auction in the Gulf of Mexico. So there hasn't been an auction to put wind in the Gulf of Mexico at all yet. It's only been in the U.S. Northeast. In the EU, 2022 saw the largest ever absolute increase in solar generation. It was up 39 terawatt hours, or 24%, on the back of a record 41 gigawatt increase in new installations, 40% more than 2021. Again, solar quietly taking off. At this rate, wind and solar will deliver 80% of Europe's electricity by 2035. 80%.
Yeah, and thank you, Vladimir Putin, for accelerating all of this by being such a jerk.
Carbon Brief says heat pumps are up to 3 times cheaper than green hydrogen in Europe, according to a study that they quoted.
Yeah, so green hydrogen is touted as a possible way to heat people's homes, and we're not ruling it out yet, but it seems kind of inefficient compared to just going with heat pumps and electricity.
Hyundai has redesigned the 2024 Kona. What do you think, Brian Stockton?
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture here. It's kind of the same car, just a little bit sleeker.
Doesn't it look a bit more like the Ioniq 5 than the Kona? Isn't it taking some cues from that? Yeah,
they're moving towards an electric design language, and it's more akin to that than the old Kona was more akin to their gasoline-powered design language, I would say.
It's interesting that they're distinguishing the electric Kona from the regular Konas. See, I wouldn't want to drive a Kona because people think, oh, it's a Kona. Like I see Konas all the time. Yeah, I want people to know I drive an electric car and electric cars work. Damn it.
People won't know that you're morally superior.
Exactly, and they need to. And finally this week, Victoria's Secret debuts recycled bra to reduce waste. Now you might say, who's going to recycle their bra? Well, the product named the Forever Bra has pads made with a proprietary fabric that can be fully recycled. It changed from a typical bra pad that contained polyurethane foam, a material that can't be melted down and extruded. So Victoria's Secret customers can take the bras back to any U.S. store and turn them in. And I don't think there's going to be a huge uptake on that. The pads will be removed for recycling or sold to perverts online on the internet. I know I added that myself. That's all for this week, kids. It's been a great time talking to you. We'll be back next week with Tesla's big investor day that's happening now. And will they show off a $25,000 car that I can afford? Stay tuned. Take the time to contact us. We are at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Drop us a line right now. Don't wait any longer. And speakpipe.com/clean energy show for leaving us a voicemail message. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for video podcasts, highlights from the show, and special features. And I can't wait till next week. We'll see you then.
See you next week.